Saudi Defense Minister Prince Khalid bin Abdulaziz discusses with U.S. envoy Tim Lunderking peace efforts in Yemen. Houthi economic war against Yemenis threatens last peacing effort in Yemen. Fire devours account for marginalized displaced families in Ma'rib Governorate. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Roshan Fuad. The Office of the UN Special Envoy to Yemen and ICRC are holding a meeting today in Amman to resume Yemeni talks. The meeting is expected to bring together the parties to the conflict to resume talks in order to release more conflict-related detainees in implementation of the Stockholm Agreement. The Office of the Envoy expressed its gratitude for Jordan's continued and valuable support for this important file. Saudi Minister of Defense Prince Khalid bin Salman has met with the U.S. Special Envoy for Yemen, Tim Lunderking, in Riyadh. During the meeting, they discussed the latest developments in Yemen and reviewed joint efforts to support ways to reach a comprehensive political solution to the Yemeni crisis, amid the attendance of Saudi and U.S. officials. In spite of diplomatic attempts by the UN and Saudi Arabia to end the war in Yemen, the Houthis are limiting the Yemeni government's access to financial and energy resources, and they appear to be more interested in fortifying their position in the country. This report has more details.
The Houthis are restricting the Yemeni government's access to energy and financial resources in the midst of diplomatic efforts by the UN and Saudi Arabia to resolve the war in Yemen. The Houthis appear more interested in capitalizing on negotiations to fortify the economic foundation of their de facto state than reaching a settlement. They want to reduce the leverage of the UN-recognized government at the negotiating table and increase their own finances. The Houthis have carried out this plan concurrently with talks with Riyadh, highlighting the fact that while bilateral talks between the Houthis and Saudi Arabia might be able to de-escalate the conflict on Saudi Arabia's southern border, they won't be enough to forge a long-lasting ceasefire between Yemen's rival factions and ultimately restore a unified Yemeni state. Shortly after entering Omani-mediated talks with Saudi Arabia in October 2022, following the expiration of a UN-sponsored truce, the Houthis carried out drone assaults on 2 oil terminals in territories controlled by the UN-recognized government. The attacks did not inflict any infrastructural damage, but they did prohibit international oil tankers from entering the ports, delaying oil shipments at a time when the Yemeni government's oil income was increasing due to a global surge in energy prices. Since the assaults, which are estimated to have cost the government $1 billion in income, the government has had increasing trouble paying public wages, which has affected army and police morale. The Houthis are also putting pressure on importers to transfer energy supplies from Aden to Hodeidah, the primary Red Sea port city still under the group's control, diverting customs revenue away from the government. According to government sources, the Houthis recently restricted gas imports from government-controlled Ma'rib and substituted local gas with more costly cooking gas imported through Hodeidah port, putting the government's finances under even more strain. The Houthis control around 1/3 of the country's land and 70 to 80% of its population.
A recent human rights report revealed that the Houthi militia has committed thousands of violations over 8 years against mosques, places, and worship. A recent report issued by the Yemeni Network for Rights and Freedom said that it documented 3,370 incidents of violations committed by the Houthi militia against mosques. In the report, the network pointed out that the violations affected mosques and places of worship in about 14 Yemeni governorates. More than 2 weeks ago, the displaced of a camp in Ma'rib were left without shelter or food after their camp was exposed to a fire that killed more than 12 families, most of whom suffered severe burns. The camera of Yemen Today channel visited the camp and prepared the following report.
There is nothing left for these displaced people inside this camp, which has been exposed several times to repeated fires that have destroyed everything they need. Some of them are trying to search for what will help them to continue living, while others find nothing but this land.
3 حرائق لا لفتوا لنا ولا نظروا لنا انظروا كيف راقدين.
3 fires have hit this area and no one cares. As you can see, people are laying in the streets. We are totally marginalized, so we call for the authorities to help us, as we can't afford either medical treatment or food.
For 12 days, these marginalized people spend their lives under severe suffering without any humanitarian or relief intervention. Perhaps humanitarian organizations will reduce the cruelty of homelessness, as they found themselves without shelter and no food or medicine. Some of them suffered severe burns, and 3 others lost their lives as a result of the fire that swept through their camp 2 weeks ago.
معانا خيمة من قماش.
Our tents are made of fabric, so that electricity or cigarettes can ignite a fire in the camp. We are Yemeni people. We are not mercenaries. We escaped the Houthi fire to face the fire of the living.
This camp is not the only one that has been exposed to these disasters of fire, as the fires are still affecting many people. The ordeals of the displaced in separate places in the governorate, which result from the random connection of electricity and the leakage of smoky gas, which has become a threat to everyone in the camps for the displaced, which lack the simplest means of safety. The number of homes that have been exposed to fire since the beginning of the current year has reached more than 162. It destroyed the residents and caused the death of 24 people without any solutions from the concerned authorities to mitigate the occurrence of fires.
The people in Yemen deserve to live in dignity and safety. They are facing a protection crisis in which Yemenis, refugees and asylum seekers all suffer. 74% of the displaced are women and children. We are ready to deliver more, but we need resources to provide protection, assistance and solutions. But above all, people in Yemen need a lasting peace to end the suffering and enable a real chance to recover and rebuild their lives.
The Ministry of Hajj and Umrah announced that it would facilitate the arrival of Yemeni pilgrims from Hajj and Umrah this year from Sana'a Airport to King Abdulaziz International Airport in Jeddah. This report has more details.
The Saudi Ministry of Hajj and Umrah has announced that it would facilitate the arrival of Yemeni pilgrims for Hajj and Umrah this year from Sana'a International Airport to King Abdulaziz International Airport in Jeddah. According to the Saudi press agency SPA, it comes as a part of the Saudi government's eagerness to facilitate pilgrims' trips and ensure the safety of visitors, as well as support and alleviate the suffering of Yemenis. A government official said that Yemenia Airways is set to launch on June 17th its first flight to transport pilgrims from Sana'a International Airport to Saudi Arabia to perform Hajj. The decision to launch flights to Jeddah and Medina airports was made upon the directives of the Yemeni Presidential Leadership Council, President Rashad Al-Alimi, and with the cooperation of Saudi Arabia.
Coming next. Al-Qasab is one of the oldest markets in Bayhan district in Shabwa province. Welcome back. El Qasab Market in Bayhan is one of the oldest commercial markets in Shabwak Governorate, as it was the only port for commercial exchange in the Bayhan regions, in which goods and commodities such as grains and salt were imported and exported during the first decades of the last century. This report has more details.
Due its location in the heart of Al Alaya neighborhood, Al Qasab Market in Bayhan is one of the region's oldest marketplaces. During the first decade of the previous century, this market was a crucial hub for economic exchange in Bayhan, where commodities and merchandise were brought from several Yemeni marketplaces, such as Harib Market, Damar Market, and Al Bayda Market.
هذا سوق القصاب كما قلنا لكم عمره ما يتجاوز حوالي 90 سنة.
This is Al Qasab Market in Bayhan, and it was established nearly 90 years ago. Goods were exported and imported here. Goods came on camels, and the market had 2 gates. In the past, it was not allowed to enter weapons and tie livestock. If anyone did, he would pay a fine or be imprisoned for 4 days.
هذا كان السوق سوق القصاب يقولون له.
The famous merchants worked in Al Qasab Market in Bayhan, such as Al-Shuaibi, Al-Jaish, Al-Mutahhar, Al-Bani, and Al-Haidar, and all the merchants of the region.
Aside from the sale of the rock salt, which was at the time very popular, was brought here by camels. After it was extracted from the Riyadh mine in Wadi Bal Harith, the trade of the grains of all kinds, including wheat, maize, and millet, which were produced locally in the farms and valleys of Bayhan, was thriving in this market. Then they were shipped in bulk to other Yemeni marketplaces.
Trade exchange was popular here. We used to buy various types of grains like corn and silk cloths. In the past, before the shops were built, the goods used to reach the center of the market, where all the merchants would see them from and buy what they need.
Only a few modest stores, some lined up mud structures and ruins, and parallel businesses that provide some information about this location.
A workshop on tax policies and revenue mobilization was concluded in the Egyptian capital, Cairo, to launch technical support for Yemeni taxes. The workshop was attended by the Undersecretary of the Ministry of Finance for the Revenue Sector and a number of specialists in the Ministry of Finance. The workshop aimed at exchanging experiences between the Yemeni and Egyptian sides in a way that contributes to enhancing tax technical capabilities and developing local revenues. The Yemeni Banks Association issued warnings of serious health repercussions that threaten to stop work in the banking sector. In light of the healthy efforts through the Judicial Authority to issue rulings and judicial orders that oblige these banks to pay deposits of depositors. This came in letters penned to the association to the Judicial Council, which is under the control of the Houthis. The coastal city of Aden witnessed a new crisis with a sudden increase in the price of ice cubes by nearly 30%. Local residents confirmed that the sellers of ice cubes in small shops raised the prices by more than 30%, with the increase in demand for them as a result of the high temperature. Many residents in various directorates stated that most of the selling shops set the value of the smallest piece of ice at 300 riyals. People of Old Aden have been suffering from the lack of water service for years. This report has more details.
People of Aden have been lacking water services for years. The state and its interventions were absent from providing the basic necessities of life in terms of public services.
In this area, and since 2015, we've been suffering from scarcity of water. Water does not reach this area at all, even though there was an installation of 3 projects. Most of the people now buy tanks, and one can reach 20,000 riyal, and in 1 month you need 2 tanks.
Citizens of Al Tawila, like other areas of Aden, depend on purchasing water and storing it in tanks. The water carriers spread here in abundance, and the difficult economic conditions in the country burdens the citizens, and it's quite hard for them to purchase these water tanks.
We have got water supply once a week.
Sometimes there is no water at all. It's really hot and the situation is worsening. We need drinking water. Unfortunately, there are no solutions.
Thousands of Yemeni families have recently been forced to give up buying water as they don't all have enough money to purchase water. They have actually started searching for free alternative sources, even if they are not safe or clean. Local authorities responsible for the water in the old city of Crater attributed the reasons for the deterioration of the services to population and urban expansion and other factors.
People here are poor. 1,000 litre of water is for 3,000 to 4,000 riyals, and they would only be enough for 2 days. It's really hot here and there is almost no water pumped into this area. The tanks you see here are brought by people.
A painful reality experienced by the citizens of Aden amid the lack of one of the most important necessities of life. Getting a drop of water has become a dream for the people of Yemen. So far, authorities are doing nothing in solving this problem that Yemenis have been suffering from for many years now.
The Minister of Public Health and Population participated in the annual conference of the Global Vaccine Alliance in Madrid. The Global Vaccine Alliance is the main supporter of providing vaccines around the world, and it had a prominent and significant role in providing the COVID-19 vaccine in Yemen. During the conference, the Minister of Health reviewed Yemen's experience in vaccines and the efforts exerted to rehabilitate the health sector. Here is a reminder of the main headlines. Saudi Defense Minister Prince Khalid bin Abdulaziz discusses with U.S. envoy Tim Lenderking peace efforts in Yemen. How the economic war against Yemenis threatens lasting peace in the country. Fire devours account for marginalized displaced families in Maghreb Governorate. This is the end of the news. It was Roshan Faed. Thank you for watching.